and thank you to everybody. A few weeks ago, like Michelle had mentioned, we showcased some use cases and stories about how data discovery, data visualization, and data democratization are making a business impact. And if you did not get to join in that webinar, please, please, please check the recording because I think it's very interesting to listen in on. Today, I know I'm talking to a different audience. I'm talking to the doers. And maybe you already do IT work or you're new to IT. But either way, I really want to say something to you. I'm proud of you. I am proud of you for showing up to this workshop today, because if you know me or follow any content that I'm into, you know that I'm a huge believer that nothing is more valuable than getting hands-on experience. And it takes commitment to show up today for a 2-hour workshop to get your hands on Tableau. So I just want to say I am proud of you. I'm Dina Tierney, founder and CEO of Pacific Point. Pacific Point is a Salesforce consulting firm, and we help companies and organizations implement Salesforce. For those of you who may not know, Tableau is part of the Salesforce family. Before I transition to the awesome Tableau team that we have to facilitate today's workshop, I'd like to share 3 takeaways that you should keep in mind. I'd like to ask you to keep in mind, not just for today's session, but also as you look ahead. Start thinking about these things as you go. So first of all, keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, hands-on, real-world experience, that's the key for your own professional growth. So please keep doing what you're doing. Number 2, elevate your company, elevate the organization that you work at. So how do you do that? You use the skills, you use the abilities that you have to help your company gain fresh insights that could really make a big impact. And right now, businesses need us, technology leaders and doers, to elevate them. And if we're the one that helps them have something impactful, I think that's super awesome. I'll give you an example. We had a client who needed to get a better understanding of their loan pipeline. It's a financial services organization. And they wanted a better forecast and plan based on their loan pipeline for a number of business reasons that you can expect in the financial services space. But what was interesting was when that data was analyzed and the reports were made, and yes, they got their pipeline data, but what was better about it was that more insights were identified that gave them new and fresh ideas on how they could close their deals faster. But we also started to pull in even more data into that scenario to help them identify new opportunities to target new customers, make new business. So what started off as one simple data request turned into new insights, it turned into inspiration, it turned into business innovation for them. So, please, think about how you could elevate. One small thing can really elevate your company. So my point number 2 is elevate your company and the organizations that you work with. They need you. My last key takeaway is just one word. It is the word go. Jump in, start connecting data, create visualizations, show people at your company and your organizations what you've done, get feedback, and keep building. The point is to start. The point is to start, right? You put some data source in there, you start with 1 or 2, then you add 3, and then you add 4, and next thing you know, you really started to gain some fresh insights. But the point is, go, try not to overthink it too much. And on the note of go, I will turn it over to Brian Hervey from Tableau. And Brian, the floor is yours.
I appreciate it, Dina. What a terrific introduction and very sound advice. As Dina mentioned, my name is Brian Hervey. Kevin McKinney, who will be presenting, and I are an account team for Tableau focused on our state and local government customers in Hawaii. I've got counterparts that handle other vertical markets, but I can be a point of contact if you don't know who your Tableau representative is. My contact information will be provided, and please reach out to me and I'm happy to connect you. We're very pleased to be able to present today. This is a workshop that we do on a very frequent basis. It is hands-on, as I believe you all know. If you cannot make it hands-on, it's okay. It'll still be valuable for you. You can follow along as Kevin runs through things, but I think there will be great value if you have downloaded the data files that have been provided and can follow along and kind of dive right in, as Dina was suggesting. It's something that we pride ourselves on at Tableau. Our mission is to help people see and understand data And the only way to do that is to really dive in head first. We try to make it as easy as possible, but that doesn't mean that it's simple. It allows for a great degree of flexibility in analyzing data, coming up with your own direction as you seek answers from that data. And throughout the next hour and 50 minutes or so, Kevin will be leading the discussion. This certainly can be an open discussion. Feel free at a certain point, if you have questions, to put them in the chat room, or if they're not being addressed properly, feel free to come off mute and ask those questions. We would, however, ask that you mute yourself if you are not talking. And I believe Kevin will probably have a very brief bio break at some point in this, maybe a five-minute break. So don't fret if you are maybe getting a little lost. Don't hesitate to raise your hand, speak up, and let us know. We've got a great group of participants today, and we'll be following up with some information after the fact. Without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Kevin.
Thank you, Brian. Aloha. Good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get things started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and here we go. And let me get the chat up on my monitor. Perfect. So welcome, everyone. As Brian mentioned, we are the Tableau team, and the purpose of today's conversation is to give everyone a foundational understanding of what is Tableau, specifically what is creating content in Tableau. So I wanted to start our conversation by talking about what are the parts, the tools in the Tableau toolbox. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the tools in the toolbox. Then we're going to take a look at what we're going to build today, and then we'll get our hands dirty and actually build some content. To start us off, the tools in the Tableau toolbox. Tableau has a number of different aspects of the platform that we provide our users with a what we call a standard creator license. This is the developer toolbox. They start out with connecting and cleaning up your data, and that starts with Tableau Prep. Tableau Prep is our content connection workflow, like cleaning and transformation workflow product. As we clean our data and get it ready for analysis, we bring it into tools like Tableau Desktop, which is what we will be primarily working in today. This is our content development suite, and includes the ability to connect to data, connect to prep outputs, build visualizations, dashboards, stories, charts, things like that. And then once we've built our content, we have the Tableau server environment, which allows us to share that content, collaborate, automate, secure, protect, all of that stuff that we've built out for our audiences to explore, evaluate, and iterate on. Tableau server itself comes in a couple of flavors. Tableau server, which is our sort of local installed on-premise solution, which can be deployed to a local machine, virtual environment, or the cloud, AWS, Google, Microsoft, or Tableau Online, which is our software as a service platform, where we manage all of the back-end infrastructure and you just play in your Tableau server, which is also very, very cool. So that's the Tableau platform. We're going to be taking a little bit of a look at Tableau server, and then we will be diving into Tableau Desktop. So for today's workshop, here's what we're going to be building. We're going to be building a dashboard that looks at FAA wildlife strike data. We're going to be exploring how Tableau works with mapping, how Tableau works with data to build things like charts and graphs. We'll be looking a little bit at the AI that's built into Tableau called Ask Data, as well as some of the other capabilities of Tableau for building out visualizations. But I always like to start with where are we going? What are we trying to build? So for our visualization here, we're going to be building an interactive dashboard where I can click on a particular piece of content. In this case, a point on our map. These are airports. And we're going to be exploring the question of which air carriers experience the most expensive wildlife strikes in this data set. So we're using this wildlife strike data because as all of you on Hawaii are familiar with, flying is a part of our lives. We fly all over the place to do our work, to visit our friends, our family, and we want to understand a bit of what is the risk associated with that. I actually started, when I started this job, I moved from Austin, Texas, all the way out here to beautiful, sunny Las Vegas, Nevada. And I was responsible for covering a territory that looked like that. So a lot of the United States, and I was going to be flying around a lot. So I wanted to understand what were good air carriers for me, what were the risks associated with my territory, and so I started exploring this data set in order to understand that question. So we're going to be going through that exercise today. While we're here in Tableau Server, a couple of the other things I like to point out is when we're talking about sharing, collaborating with data, a lot of that conversation, a lot of the users who are going to receive that conversation aren't going to be developing content. They're going to just be seeing the content that we as the developers have created. So a lot of that can be engaged with in our Tableau server environment, but we can also push this content into a number of different places. We can have this content delivered to our users via subscriptions in their email so that it just goes into their inbox. We can have this content hosted on our website. We can have different elements of this information raised as our important metrics so that you can either get a dashboard on a particular day of the week. Say Monday, you've got your activities dashboard, and that's going to help you decide what you're going to do for the week. Or we can set it up so that we can drive content into our inbox or to our community based on changes in the data, so that if the data changes, I can set an alert, tell Tableau, send out this information if we exceed or fall below our certain benchmarks. So there's lots of things that this enables us to do to communicate out with our team. Another part of this sort of back and forth conversation that we're having with our data is sometimes the data, or sometimes the process of creating content, I don't have the energy or I don't have the bandwidth to learn how to work with a whole new content development tool like Tableau, but I still need to ask questions about my data. And that's where tools like Ask Data, which is part of our Tableau server suite. Ask Data is a way for us to ask questions of our data without having to open up Tableau Desktop or develop content from scratch. So here I have a data set. This is our data set that we're going to be working with that I've already published to my server. And let's just ask a basic question of our data. So this data set includes wildlife strike demographic information about these incidents. And one of the metrics in this is the type of wildlife, the species that is involved in these incidents. So a question that we might have just from the get-go is how many of a particular species are involved in an incident. So I want to know the count of, let's do the count of index, which is our number of index, which is the number of our incidents. This could be report ID, this could be anything that we were interested in counting. So I want to know the count, and in this case, there's 33,000 incidents in this data set by species. So I can get a quick understanding of what is going on in my data without having to know. I can just type like Google query my data, and I can change things around in here if I want to. So like right now I'm looking at the raw number of incidents, but I might have a different kind of question. Like I might want to understand which cost of repairs. So let's look at cost. Is which species is the most expensive when it comes to these incidents? So has the highest cost of repairs. So when we look at the average cost of repairs from our data set, we see that the bald eagle and the American pelican have some of the highest cost of repairs on average in this data set. So that's an interesting observation that we've observed as we go into our data into this sort of question that we're going to. So we're going to keep these questions, these sort of elements in mind as we go through our analysis. Now, as the say manager of a business unit team that I'm going to my analyst, I'm saying, hey, can we dive into this a little deeper? I can save this question, or I can save this view that I created here in my server, and I can basically say, hey, go over to this thing that I saved, please. Let's explore this idea a little bit more. So we're going to go into that as we dive into this. So bald eagles, American white pelicans, Canada geese. These are some 3 characters that we want to pay attention to as we go through this build out. So now that we've got an understanding of what the data is that we're going to be working with, let's actually look at Tableau Desktop. So here I am in my Tableau Desktop tool. And there's a number of different things that I am offering you right off the bat in Tableau. Some things to keep in mind is that Tableau is always trying to transfer information in the most intuitive way possible when it comes to how we're presenting our layout and what we're trying to do. So that goes into like how we've designed the layout. So for example, we typically see that when we're working on a layout or a page like this, that we're going to be sort of our focal point is the upper right-hand corner. And we're generally, our eyes scan from left to right, from top to bottom, or the upper left-hand corner from left to right, from top to bottom. So over here in the upper left corner, we have our connection pane. This is where we're going to connect to our data. And there are over 80 different data systems and tools that we can connect to. And if you include things like our web data connector and ODBC and JDBC connectors, we can connect to dozens, if not hundreds, of additional data sources through these types of connections. Some that I like to point out right from the get-go, Excel and text files. This is where a lot of our folks start their conversation with data, but also spatial files and statistical files. If you've got an SPSS file or an Esri shape file, we can connect to those too. From a database perspective, Oracle, Amazon, Esri servers, Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, all sorts of data systems that you might be interested in or already be using are available here for us to work with. So really, really robust collection of different data systems. If there's a question about whether or not you can connect to this, talk to your account team. My peer on your account team will be able to answer more specifically about how to do the specific thing that you're trying to do. For our exercise today, we'll be working with Excel and text files. So that's what we're going to be digging in today. A couple of other things that I like to point out on this page. Any content that you're working on, well, regardless of where it's saved, will appear here in the open section. So if there's something that you've been working on and you just want to jump right back into it, you can just click on the Tableau application button, and it'll be here. You can just jump right back into wherever you were. Over here on the right-hand side, we have our Discover pane. Our Discover pane includes a lot of really good links to training materials, like our Getting Started and training video library. If I go out here to my website, this is the training library. It's huge. There's dozens of hours of content here. I also highly recommend visiting our YouTube channel, Tableau Software. Here, there are thousands of hours of content. Most of the sessions from our Tableau conference, our annual Tableau conference, are recorded here. So if you want to understand calculations, you can come in here and you can, let's go to getting started with calculations, and we can understand parameters or something like that. A 5-minute video, that's fantastic. If I want to understand something a little deeper, I can go over here to YouTube, and I have hours and hours of additional content that goes deeper into the concept of parameters or whatever it is that I'm interested in. So lots of really great free content. And then we also have lots of really good directed or self-paced training that's at an additional cost as well. So we can help you get and up-level your team in Tableau above and beyond things like this workshop, things like this free training, with lots of different other resources. So the last thing that I like to point out is our sample workbooks. So a lot of time has been spent developing out training resources and things like that, but we also have training resources that we like to point out in the form of our sample workbooks. And the reason that we have provided these is oftentimes the struggle with adopting a tool like Tableau is imagining a different way of visualizing your data. A lot of people are used to looking at reports that look like this. And when they start to look at a tool that looks like this, it feels different, and different feels uncomfortable. I want to tell you right now that it's a really good idea to get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable when starting out with a tool like Tableau, because Tableau is designed from the ground up to be different from everything that you've done with data visualization before. We want to be the tool to help you, see and understand your data. And we look at Excel 40 years ago as the example of what we want to be today. Excel 40 years ago was different. It was easy. It was everywhere. It is the standard of looking at crosstabs and visualizations from that period. We want to be able to be the next generation of understanding your data, where everybody can do it easily just from the get-go. And tools like the sample workbooks here are designed to give you different ways of thinking about how you can visualize your information. And not just that, but help you to understand, well, how did you build this? So I can come in here and I can look at the individual components and how they're laid out, so that I can recreate this and reverse engineer this to do this information for my team. We have a really big philosophy at Tableau when it comes to content of beg, borrow, and steal. Beg, borrow, and steal the good ideas to make it easier to communicate to my team about our data. So now that we can have a sense of what does the interface look like with Tableau, let's actually start to build some content. So there we go. So if you ever want to get back to the discovery or to the home screen, this little star icon in the upper left-hand corner will take you right back. So we're going to go ahead and get and connect to our data. So I'd like everybody to select Excel and navigate to where you have saved the wildlife strike file. That's what we're going to start with. So this wildlife strike data is a set of demographic information related to wildlife strikes from the FAA. It's in a standard Excel file. We've got columns representing all of the different demographic categories, and then rows representing each of our incident reports. This is the style of data that Tableau likes the best, but this might not be exactly the style of data that you are commonly seeing in your Excel or your data, and that's okay. We've got a lot of different transformation tools, or you can just try and connect to the data directly and see what it looks like in Tableau. But this sort of columns representing each of your different data elements is the best structure that Tableau prefers. We have a couple of different tools to help identify the tables within your data set. Sometimes you're working with a PDF document or an Excel document that has a lot of formatting. The data interpreter here will scan the Excel workbook or the PDF or the CSV and try to identify table structures within the view within the workbook, and will present those table structures so that it's easy for you to pull out the information that you need to use for your analysis. To give you an example of what this looks like, Tableau can generate a little Excel form like this, where it's looking at your Excel. It'll scan through the view and try to identify, as we have here in red, the header, and then in green, all of the rows of data associated with that header, and will automatically generate a table view of that. So some really cool sort of backroom AI stuff that's going on to look for this. So now that we've got our data connected, Tableau has scanned the data, is looking at what is there, and it's starting to allocate identifying information with each of the columns of data. So it's, say, for example, it's seeing these are all letters, so it's giving this a string. Seeing these are all numbers, it's giving it a pound sign indicating numeric values. It sees data that looks like dates and aligning it with the date field. And some of these things are pretty common, like strings and numerical information, but some of these things are uncommon, like geographical information. It sees a field that says that's called state with a lot of 2-digit abbreviations, and it thinks this is a geographic field called state. A couple of other things that Tableau is doing in here is it is giving us some options about how we want to maintain our connection to our data. Right now, I have a live connection to the data. So if I go into my Excel document and add a new row of data and and save that document, it's going to update in here with that new information. I can also take an extract, a snapshot of that data. Depending on the size and the location of the data that I'm working with, I might prefer to take an extract. Work with that data. Tableau, when we take an extract, it creates what we call a hyperfile. That hyperfile is this really highly optimized data set or data storage object that allows us to do all the sort of manipulation we want to do with the data set, but it's not relying on the original data location to allow us to query that information. So for those of you who are familiar with database systems and things like that, I'm not writing back to or requesting information back from the database every time I'm taking an action. I'm doing it against this extract, and that saves process and really improves the efficiency of my data system. So some cool options that we have for connectivity. For our exercise today, we're going to maintain our live connection. So let's jump into the content development window. So we're going to click on sheet 1 down here, and we're going to start to build our visualizations. So when we click on sheet 1, all of those columns of data that we were connected to in our data source tab have moved over here and are now our data dimensions and measure values. So our dimensions and measure values are broken up into categorical information over here in blue. This is what we're going to want to slice and dice our data by. And numeric information down here in green. This is what we're going to aggregate or otherwise do math on. So sometimes Tableau sees a field that's all numeric values, and it says, I want to consider this as a thing that I'm going to aggregate or do math on. But my flight number and my index number, even though it's all numeric, these are categories. So if I want, I can just grab these categories and bring them up here into the blue section, and now they're things that I can slice and dice by. So I can easily change how Tableau is thinking about the data by just dragging and dropping pieces into the places that I need them to be. Likewise, if there's a particular field that I'm going to generally want to count, I can take that object and I can say, for example, airport ID. If I drag it down here, I'm going to get a count of those airport IDs. So again, I can move things around, play with how they're located. Additionally, we can change information about like the data type. So I have this thing called airport ID, and this is a really great feature of Tableau. If you go down to, if you right click on a pill here, like they call pills, and go down to describe, we can see some information about what is contained within this, sort of a digest of the data information here. So these are our airport IDs. These are the airport codes. And Tableau actually knows the airport codes and where they're located geographically. So I can come in here, and I'd like everybody to do this. I want you to click on the little ABC icon here. Or if you click on this, you can go down to geographic role. Both of these things will allow you to do the same thing. Go to geographic role, and we're going to go to airport and select airport. I'll leave this up here for you guys. So we clicked on that little ABC icon, went down to geographic role, and we're going to choose airport. And what this is going to do is it's going to tell Tableau, don't just think about this as alphanumeric characters, it's just string. These strings have meaning. They are the airport codes, and I want you to allocate these airport codes to their locations. So we're going to take advantage of this in a minute. So as we explored with our Ask data, if we want to understand our data set, we want to understand how many elements are we working with. There's 33,800 reports in this data set. So I just dragged index number over here, and it gave me a list of all the individual index numbers. If I right click on this pill, I can go down to measure and choose count distinct. And this will give me a count of all of my index numbers. If I hover, I can see 33,800. Now, I'm counting my index numbers here, and that's helpful. I have a key I have a key field in my data set that is telling me what all of my rows are. But in Tableau, I also have this thing called count down here at the bottom. This is going to be there regardless of whether I have that index number field or not. Count is just a count of all of the rows, and I can use this field as well to help me see that same information. So whether you have a field that gives you a unique ID for every row or not, we're going to be able to find out how many rows of data we have in our data set. I'm going to use my index number, measure value, and distinct count as our thing that we're measuring for this analysis. So one of the first questions that I had as I was looking at this data was I wanted to know which air carrier was a good choice for me to use as I was traveling all over the West. So let's explore our air carriers. Now, in this case, I have a group of a data type called operators. These are our airlines. So I'm just going to go up here to search, and this is one of the best practices that I like to use. If I'm focusing on a particular data area, and I have a naming convention that helps me have similar data dimensions be called similar things, I can do a little search here, operator, and I can have all of those things together so that I'm just working with a subset of the list of things that I have here. So that just helps me to focus on what I'm interested in looking at. Now, operator is the airline. So let me drag this into the view. You can see I've got lots and lots of different airlines. Let me pivot this. So the science of visual analytics describes there we go. So the science of visual analytics describes our ability to gather information from what we see as these are what we call pre-attentive attributes, the things that catch our attention. And one of the pre-attentive attributes that we see in terms of understanding and interpreting bar charts is that in most cases, people are able to read and interpret horizontal bar charts faster and more easily than vertical bar charts. So just as we had here, it's a lot with all of these different data in the view here, it's a lot easier to read our view like this than it is like this. And this little button here is just switching what is on our columns and rows. I often refer to pivoting the view, and people think that I'm talking about like creating a pivot chart in Excel. This is not the same thing. This is just swapping out how the visualization looks rather than what the data structure looks like, which is what you typically see happening with the pivot chart. I have my data visualized this way. Let's sort it. This is one of the things in Tableau that we very intentionally designed to be as intuitive as possible, and intuitive different things when it comes to user experience. But basically what we wanted to do was have as many different reasonable places for you to sort things as you could imagine. So there's about 6 different ways to sort things. I can sort by hovering over the axes here and clicking a sort button. I can right click on a pill and sort. There's a little sort button up here. There's lots of different ways that I can sort and places that I can easily find to sort things. And that design idea has persisted through a lot of things in Tableau. So there's usually at least 3 to 4, if not 6 or 7 different ways to do everything in Tableau. We actually have a little internally for folks who are new on our engineering team, to say how fast can you find the 6 different ways to sort, like, or to average, or to do things like that. So there's always more than one way to do just about everything in Tableau, and we did it on purpose that way because everybody's different and everybody sort of comes to understand how to do things in a different way. And so that's why we did it. We wanted to make it as approachable and easy to get to what you're trying to do as possible. So I've got all of my different operators here, but I'm quickly overwhelmed by this. There's lots of different things like Republic Airlines. That's an airline that I have never heard of, and I don't even know whether or not they operate in the United States. Well, I mean, obviously they do. This is an FAA report, but I have some categories over here that might help me digest these different carriers into an easier way. So let's pull out operator type. I'm just going to drag it up here onto rows. And now I can see there's cargo and passenger airlines, other airlines, things like that. And then I can drag out operator subtype. And I'm just dragging and dropping things into the view. And these are helping me see my information in different ways. There's cargo carriers, parcel and cargo, code share carriers, domestic carriers. Well, what I really want to focus on is these domestic carriers. So I'm going to right click on operator type, and I want to show filter, and I'm going to right click on operator subtype and do the same thing, show filter. And this creates a little filter over here, a user filter that I can choose to select or deselect whatever I'm interested in. So for operator type, I want to focus on domestic passenger operators. And for operator subtype, I want to focus on domestic carriers. Now, the other thing I want to make sure I'm doing is that every other visualization that I have and that I'm building, I want them all to use the same selections over here. So for my filters, I'm going to right click on them and I'm going to apply to worksheets, all using this data source. I'm going to do that for both of these. Apply to worksheets, all using this data source. And what that's going to do is every new sheet that I create is going to have this same filter applied to it. That's going to be useful for me during the creation process, but it's also going to be useful for me during the dashboard creation and like how I'm going to allow my end users to interact with this data. So now I've got the collection of users of carriers here. I noticed that there is a hierarchy that exists here. My operators are part of operator subtypes, which themselves are part of our operator types. So if I want, I can actually create a drill down pathway so that I can go from a high level view down into a more detailed view. And I can do that really quickly and easily. So I'm going to grab my operator type over here. I'm just going to drag it on top of operator. And that's going to ask me, do I want to create a hierarchy? Yes, I want to create a carrier hierarchy. And now I have this new object called a hierarchy. And I can drag pieces into the mix here. I can sort of swap them around so that they're in the order that they need to be in order for me to navigate through this. And that creates these little plus and minus icons, which allow me to drill up and down in my data. Another thing that I noticed from this collection here is that some of these airlines, for example, US Airways, they don't exist anymore. This is an airline that merged with American Airlines 10 years ago. So I can grab US Airways and American Airlines. I'm just control clicking these headers, and I can group them together. And that creates a new data object called a group that has restructured my data so that these two pieces, American and US Airlines, are combined together into a single data dimension. I can do the same thing for a couple of the other airlines that merged together. So for example, United merged with Continental group. and Delta merged with Northwest and group, and even where is it? Alaska Airlines merged with Virgin America. Is it Virgin America? Yeah, Virgin America. There we go. And so now I have these completely new data dimensions in my data set that are reflective of these mergers. And I can take this object, this group object, and put it in the appropriate place in my hierarchy. So now I can drill from my groups into the original operators to see the relative contribution of these mergers to the data. Let's drill back up. So I've got my operators here, and I'm looking at the raw count of wildlife strike incidents in my data set. And I can see that Northwest or Southwest Airlines represents by far the largest number of wildlife strike incidents in this data set. Let me go ahead and put a label on this. I'll click this little T icon, and it'll give me my row labels in my data. Now that's a lot. It's 30% more than the next highest in this list. Let me go ahead and set my view so that I can see the entire view. This will probably be easier for you guys to read on your screens. And we can see the relative scales of these bar charts. Another note on pre-attentive attributes, these horizontal views, when it comes to the actual bars themselves, bars that are of similar size are easier to tell the difference, like these two here, in a horizontal view than they are in a vertical view. It's just easier for your eye to tell the difference. So I've got my raw count of wildlife strike incidents, but that's not the only thing that matters in these incidents. If I am flying through a swarm of mosquitoes, I'm probably hitting millions of individual, wildlife animals in the mosquito swarm, but that is going to have zero impact on the airframe of the aircraft. But that's not always true, and so I want to know which air carriers had the most expensive on average incidents. So I have this cost of repairs field that we looked at with our species analysis in Ask Data. So let's use this as part of our analysis here as well. So I'm going to bring this into our onto our color. So I'm actually dragging this out with the right mouse button and dropping it. And when I drag and drop with the right mouse button instead of the left mouse button, I get this little menu over here. And this allows me to select my aggregation without having to go in here and right click and select it. So let's go ahead and choose an average cost of repairs and hit OK. So here I can see the average cost of repairs. If I hover over these, so Southwest Airlines has 38,000 incidents in this data set, but their average cost of repairs is only $185,000, whereas American Airlines and US Airways has an average cost of repairs of almost $2.5 million, despite the fact that they have 30% fewer incidents. So this is an interesting observation, and I want to get a little bit more context around this. So let's go in here, and I'm going to choose explain data. Now, explain data, I right-clicked on the mark that I'm curious about, the bar here, and I want to choose explain data. Now, what this is doing is explain data is taking my measure values, my count of index number, my cost of repairs, and it's comparing those values against all of the other data dimensions in my data set. And it's looking for statistically significant result sets. So if we just look at our count of index numbers, it's telling us that some of our operators, like American Airlines, the combination of American Airlines has a higher relative number of incidents than all of our other categories. So that's an observation based on this selection. It's also noticed that the MD-82 aircraft also has a large percentage of incidents relative to other categories of aircraft. So this is an interesting observation, our aircraft type. But what drew me to this mark wasn't the number of incidents, it was actually the cost of repairs. Let's explore that tab here. Now, again, here it's noting that American Airlines has a relatively high cost of repairs on average, but it's also noticed there's a single extreme value. So in this case, it's observed that of the 18 incidents that had some cost of repairs associated with them, which is an important note, of the 25-ish thousand, 25-ish hundred incidents, only 18 of them had cost of repairs associated with them. So that's an important note. But of those 18 incidents for American Airlines, one of those records has a cost of repairs of $41 million. So just some back of the napkin math, this is the cost of a plane, whereas $100 so thousand dollars is like the cost of an engine. So relative scales here. So I want to know more about this. So if we look at our analysis here, it gives us a descriptive analysis here, but it also gives us a visualization that helps us to see the relative scale of this and how this is such an outlier from the rest of the incidents, the other 18 incidents that had some cost of repair associated with them. So I actually want to use this. I want to use this visualization. I want to use this report and iterate on it for my analysis. So I'm going to click this little button here, and this pops that out into Tableau Desktop. It automatically creates a visualization for me. And now that I have this, I'm going to go ahead and close my explain data view. So I have a view here that shows me the relative cost of this incident. I want to augment my data with more information. So I'm going to come in here. First things first, I always like to fill the screen. So I'm going to fill the screen, entire view. Now, this is only for American Airlines. So I'm going to pull this little filter off here. This is when I selected American Airlines over here. When I right-clicked on it, it created this filter that focused the analysis just on American Airlines. That's okay. I want to focus on all of my air carriers. I'm going to pull this off. So now this is still a major outlier for all of my domestic passenger air carriers. But I also see another outlier. That's helpful. Let's add some more context here. I want to understand what were the species involved. So I'm going to put species on T2. And now I can click on my outlier here and I can see that Canada geese were the species involved with this incident. And if I click on Canada geese, I can see where are other Canada geese in the context of this view. If I click on this other outlier, I can do the same thing. This is bald eagles. Where are bald eagles in our collection? So Canada geese, bald eagles, those are two of the species on our top 3 list from over here. Bald eagles, Canada geese, highest average cost of repairs. So this is helping us frame that context. I'm going to go ahead and add another piece of context here. So I've got the species, I've got the cost of repairs, I've got that information, but I also have this thing called remarks. And this is actually incident report records. So if I pull this out onto detail, let's actually see what the FAA said about this particular incident. So this particular incident was incurred when multiple bird strikes happened during the initial climb. The aircraft lost thrust in both engines and landed in the Hudson River. Aha, I've got a clue. They landed in the Hudson River. Well, the only wildlife strike incident in recent memory that landed in the Hudson River forever was the Miracle on the Hudson, where if we go on to see, there was a single minor injury. There was no loss of life. Everybody was ferried off of the aircraft. It's a Miracle on the Hudson. The single most expensive wildlife strike incident in US history. no loss of life, thankfully. And in this case, and actually in this case too, no loss of life, just a bald eagle lost the engine, had to land the aircraft. But these two are definitely outliers when it comes to this experience, these wildlife strike events. So I want to take these two incidents and I want to create a set of major cost outliers. And what I can do with this is I can use this set, this new object called a set, which is sort of an in-out group, to help my audience understand when these outliers are included in our analysis, what our measures result in, and when they're excluded from our analysis, what does that mean? So we can use this. I'm going to add this. I'm going to apply this to all using this data source, and I'm going to show this filter. So now if we want to see what is our average cost of repairs as compared to our median cost of repairs, we can remove our outliers and see how that average changes. 232,000 versus 700,000. So that's significantly changing our average cost of repairs. So this is really helpful for us in understanding our data. Put this up color as well. So we've got an understanding of who has been involved in these wildlife strike incidents. We've got an understanding of what has happened. Now we want to understand where are these things going on. So before we jump into the mapping portion, I want to take 5 minutes. Let's stretch our legs, take a drink of water, which is what I'm going to do. Go use the bathroom if you need to, and we will be back in 5 minutes. I'm also happy to take any questions while this is going on. If you want to ask your question, feel free to go ahead and take yourself off mute. If you don't want to have your voice heard, you can go ahead and type it in the chat. We'll read out your question.
Hey, Kevin, how do you remove the filter? I'm still just seeing the outliers for Northwest Airlines and Southwest Airlines.
So you can pull a filter off of the view, and it will remove that filter from. It will remove that from the data, so you will see all of the results. How to group operators? Yeah. So let me go back over here. So if there's if there are two operators that you want to group together, like let's grab AirTran and Frontier. So I'm just grabbing in the headers. It's oftentimes people will grab like the boxes that they're interested in. This is not how we want to group things. We grab our headers and then click on the little paperclip icon, and that will allow you to group them.
Hello, I seem to have missed a step. How do you get the numbers in the rows? I see you get the values there.
Here?
Yeah.
So definitely. I just clicked on this little T button up here. Though it's a best practice if you want to get your numeric values here, you can actually take the thing that you're counting, like in this case, my index number. Here's a little trick. If you hold the control key while you drag and drop, so I want to unlabel, it will create a copy of that pill that you're dragging. So holding the control key while you drag and drop will create a copy. And in this case, it gives me it puts it on text. just like this does. But the difference here is I can modify this. So I can change how I want my label to look and how I want it to be oriented when it's over here, much more so than by just clicking on this little text button. So like if I just want the min and max values here, I can set all of this stuff up with the pill on text rather than just having the little text button up here. So more manipulation, more different ways that I can choose to visualize my data by having it.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, what was that? You right click the see, well, I got it there. So how did you get that menu option to pop up?
So you just click on this button here, label.
Oh, okay, I got it.
And all of these little buttons here are menus. So while I can drag things onto objects like detail, label, tooltip, etc., each one of these has within it a menu that allows me to customize what this looks like.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. What group or set did you create for the event sheet? So what I did was I grabbed these 2 points. So this is the difference. When we were talking about grouping, I said, grab your headers. Like I showed here, grabbing headers allows you to create a group. Grabbing marks, whether they're bars, points, X's, map dots, whatever, grabbing points or marks allows me to create a set. And so in this case, I just grabbed the 2 outliers in my set here, or in my visualization, and I created a set. And that's how I got this major cost outliers object. If you're interested in grouping or sets and the different things that you can do with that after what we've seen here, you want to go into it a little deeper, I highly recommend looking at the training video on grouping and sets. These are really powerful tools that can allow you to do a lot of cool things. So take a look at what we can do here with sets, as well as what we can do here with sets. Sets are probably one of the most powerful tools in the Tableau toolbox, and I highly recommend if you're curious, poking into these workshops as well to see what they have to offer about those topics. Okay, so 5 minutes are up. We're all back in front of our machines. We've done our little exercises. We're stretched out. We're hydrated. Now we want to know, where are our incidents occurring? So we took the time to give our airports a geographic assignment. They are now, our airport IDs are now geographically tied to airports. And we're going to create a map of all of the airports in this data set. So for that, all we have to do is just double click on airport ID here. And it automatically generates a map of all of the airport locations that our filters have allowed for. The in-out thing here is a result of the set that we created on our incident event report. So I have added this as a filter that will be carried on through our analysis. But yeah, we created our set by selecting these 2 pieces here, creating a set, and then that created this object here. Cool. So we got our map. Now we want to get some meaningful information from this. So every point on this map is an airport that had an incident. But we want to know the relative scale of the incidents at these airports. So let's use the same measures that we were analyzing in our previous reports, our number of incidents and our cost of repairs. We're going to visualize that information on our map here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab our index number. We're going to use the right mouse click drag method. So I'm going to hold the right mouse button and drag this onto, we're going to put this one on size. That is the number of incidents. So we want the distinct count of index number. And so all of our points are scaled by the number of incidents that happened there. So just like we were talking about a second ago, if we want to change the size of our map pins here, which I like, some of these are fine, but some of these, like these ones out here in Montana, are hard to see. So I'm going to click on size and I'm going to scale this up a bit, make them a little bigger. Now, the other measure that we were tracking is cost of repairs. So again, I'm going to hold the right mouse button and I'm going to drag this onto color and choose average cost of repairs. So I chose size for our index numbers because that's how I've used size elsewhere. The size of our bar is our number of incidents. The size of our bubble is the number of incidents. When we're building visualizations, it's a great idea to use the same pre-attentive attributes: size, color, scale, orientation, shape, etc. Use the same pre-attentive attributes to mean the same thing in each visualization. So we used color to indicate average cost of repairs. We're going to use color to indicate average cost of repairs here. Now, this color, this blue gradient color for cost is okay, but I want something that's a little bit more distinct. So I can come out here onto color and I can edit the color that I'm using. And instead of having blue, I'm going to choose a orange and blue diverging color palette. Now, I like orange and blue because it is, from a accessibility standard, orange and blue is a color combination that is easy for people, for most people who are colorblind, to see and distinguish. So I also want to reverse this so that the most costly locations are bright orange. So go ahead and hit OK. And now we can start to see where we have some incidents that are more costly, a little bit easier than we were seeing before. Some other things that I can do here is I can decrease my opacity to make things a little bit more transparent. I can also add a border here. I like gray to make the circles a little bit more distinct. And that also helps some of these smaller points pop a little bit better. So we can see here that back in the background, we've got a particularly costly event that happened out here in New York. I think I know which event that was, but I want to understand that airport a little bit better. I see that that is KLGA, and I have an idea of which airport that is, but I'd like to be able to see the actual airport name in my data set. I don't have this in this data. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to augment my data with new information. So I'm going to come out here to data source. I'm going to add an additional data source. I'd like all of you to do this as well. I'd like you to add a text file, and I'd like you to choose the airport text file. Now, this airport text file includes my airport names as well as the airport IDs. We'll take a look at it. So I'm going to pull out airport CSV into my view, and you see I've got this little noodle here. This is going to create a relationship between my airport CSV and my wildlife strings. Now it's going to ask me how I want to relate these data. And in this case, I want it to compare airport IDs to make sure that the data for the airports are consistent. Now I have my airport IDs and I have my airport names, and this is what I want. But I don't really need these employment numbers. So I'm gonna click the header, select the headers on both of these, and I'm just gonna right click and choose hide. I don't need that information. I actually don't even need the airport ID here. So I'm gonna right click on that and hide that as well. This is all the information I need, the airport. So now I have a new field over here called airport name. And I'm gonna put this on detail. And now when I hover over my airports, I can see the airport. And if I go back over here, I can see that that was LaGuardia. That's where Sully took off from when he had his fateful flight back in 2012. So we're starting to get a sense of where these events are going on and what's happening in these individual locations. So I'm going to call this event location. Now, in addition to this, I have my, I want to get a sense of like, when are these incidents happening? Is there some patterns about when these things are happening that I can use to help me understand what's going on here? So I have a couple of different fields that I have in here. I have my incident date. I have my index number. What I want to understand is, let's look at our index number. Let's look at our incident date. There it is. How can I visualize this? Well, I have this tool up here called Show Me. And Show Me gives me some options. Let me actually switch how I'm considering this. I want to count the number of incidents. So I had that count field. So I'm going to choose that here. And that'll give me the same information as my index number. And I want to see this as seasonal information, as seasonal data. And it gives me some recommendations about the types of information that I can see here. It's saying that a line chart is what's recommended for this. So I'm going to go ahead and select the recommended view. And it gives me a line chart. It gives me a starting point. Now, that's one of the great things about Show Me is it's a great tool to help me see context. If I want to see the relative number of incidents per year, or see this as a bar chart, or as a tree map, I can see them in all of these different fashions. But it gives me some visual best practices recommendations as well, by highlighting the ones that it thinks are best for what you're trying to see. But then you can augment it just like we did with the results from our explain data. So I want to see actually seasonal information. So I want to see this monthly. So Tableau does a really good job of working with time data. It can imagine time in a lot of different ways. Specifically, it can consider time in two fashions. Buckets of time. So like Tuesday and Wednesday are different buckets of time than May and June, or 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. So buckets of time to slice and dice our data by, or as time trunks or time slices. So like all of the information from June to January, from 2022 to 2023, like a truncation of time, and that can get more granular, all of the information at the hourly level, or more aggregated, all of the information at the annual level. So some cool different ways that Tableau can slice and dice time. But the other thing is Tableau automatically understands time. So I don't have to create different data dimensions for months or days of the week or fiscal years or things like that. Tableau automatically understands a lot of that stuff, or can be told how to understand that stuff really easily. So I want to look at this seasonally. So I'm going to choose the bucket, the time buckets of month. So now all of my annual data is aggregated into each different month. So 4 years of January data, 4 years of February data, et cetera. If I want, I could break this out so that I can see my individual years. So I'm going to take my incident date data, drop it on color, and now I have all of my annual information stacked on top of each other. One of the things that I like to do is sort of a visual best practice when it comes to looking at charts like this is I like to have my my month or my time period that I want everybody to pay attention to is like a high contrast color. My most recent time period to be another pretty high contrast color, and then other time periods to be more muted like this. And this will allow me to see what is most recent, what happened after that, or just prior to that, and then everything else. This is a great way to sort of keep your information density high while at the same time not having so many colors that it becomes distracting. So what I can see here is that there's a pattern that my wildlife activity is roughly consistent with my air travel occurrence, except for in the fall and winter months when wildlife activity goes down, but we still have high air traffic. So some interesting observations here. Any questions? So now that we've built these visualizations, let's go ahead and combine them all together into a dashboard. So when we start to build the dashboard, Tableau takes all of the visualizations that we've created, and these are going to be the elements that we're going to use to build our visualization. So instead of pulling out data dimensions from the left-hand side, we're pulling out the visualizations from the left-hand side. Now, when I start building a dashboard, what I like to do is I like to create the layout or this sort of space, the canvas scale that I'm going to be working with. For this one, I'd like 1,000 pixel width. 1,000 pixel width is a really good scale for a lot of like web browsers to be embedded into a lot of websites and things like that. But what we typically see is people are more than willing to scroll in a web browser. So let's do something like 1,500. And so we have a vertically oriented visualization that we can use as sort of our starting point. But we can adjust this to be whatever. Maybe I'll make this more square. So I'll make it 1,000. There we go. So let's start building our visualization. I personally like to build visualizations around maps. I feel like they make a really good centerpiece. But build your visualization around the piece of data that is the most important for your audience, regardless of what style of visualization it is. Also, just like we were talking about, like pre-attentive attributes and how people read, be sensitive to the audience that you're going to be working with for how you're orienting your information. Typically, you want to have the highest level, most important information at the top, and then have as you go, from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner of your visualization of your dashboard, have information go from general to specific, from aggregated to granular. So don't put your like detailed row level digest at the top of your view. Have that be down at the bottom as part of like, as you work your way through the data, as you're making selections and filters, that information gets focused down to what it is that you as the audience member are interested in exploring. So now that we've got our sort of sense of like how we're trying to represent this information, we can start to pull out other pieces. So as I pull out other visualizations into the view, I get this little drop shadow indicating where this visualization is going to appear on my dashboard and what space that is going to take up. So we can scale this for whatever it is that we're trying to build. I think it's also helpful to understand that you don't have to have the perfect layout right from the first thing that you pull out, that you can manipulate it as you design it. So I want to have my information sort of laid out like this, and we can stylize this to be more appropriate to our end user. Some of the things that we typically do are removing unnecessary headers if they don't add useful context. We might also adjust what we're showing as our filterable things. If I've got it over here as a filter, maybe I don't need it elsewhere, or vice versa. So that the pieces of information that we want to show stand out and are more prominent. You know, we've got this square layout here, so maybe I don't want to have the same layout design that I have over here in my in the dashboard that I showed you at the beginning. Maybe I want to reorient it a little bit. So let me pull my information around a bit to give it a little bit more of a design that makes sense for what we're doing here. The other thing is, I don't always have to have things blocked up and boxed up in that same way. I can actually have pieces floating over other pieces to give it the context that I want it to have. So designing this and orienting this in a way that makes sense for your audience is really easy. Let's go ahead and clear out some of our formatting. On this particular view to give us a little bit of there we go. So we've got this cool little interactive thing down here. And the last thing that I like to do is when I'm working with a view that has a lot of like filters that I want to use, sort of laying out the pieces in a way that allows it to be the kind of interaction that I want. So I want to have like the choice to take filter actions up at the top. So one of the ways that I like to create filter boxes is I'll take a horizontal object from over here, drag this into the view. Then I'll take my filters and I'll put them into this object here. This creates a little container for my filters to live in so that I can move the filters around as I want to. And these filters, I want them to be drop-down filters. So I'm going to click on this little tab here, this little caret. I'm going to choose multi-value drop-down for both of these. Multi-value drop-down. And then if I double click on the gray headers, it'll give me the container. And last but not least, let me go ahead and show my dashboard title. I'm going to call this and I can take my little filter object here and I can pull it up here so that it's right at the top of my view. So the last thing that I want to do, let's zoom in here, move some things around just to place these nicely. I'm going to make all of these objects interactive. So I'm going to make this an interactive object. I'm going to make this an interactive object. These little filter objects allow me to have each piece sort of connected to the other pieces. And so now I can select American Airlines, US Airways, and it filters all the information down to that selection. I could select, you know, August through October, and it filters the data down to that time period, et cetera. How did you add filters to the dashboard in the first place? Back when I created this first view, I added some filters to my list, and those filters carried on through my analysis and were output when I added this. But if there's filters that I want to use aren't in the view, like for example, I don't have my in-out filter for my set. I can come into a view that I know uses that, go to filters, add that filter, major cost outliers in this case. And that's going to create a filter that got dropped in here somewhere. I don't know where it went. There it is. Okay, so I can add that into my list, single value dropdown, and now I can use that. So I can see what is the impact on my data if I just look at, if I exclude those outliers. We can see how the data changes to reflect when we don't have outliers in our data set. So now that I've built my data, my analysis, I can come up here to server. I can publish my workbook to my Tableau server. And share that published content with my community. So that's there we go. So that's developing in Tableau soup to nuts. Any questions? So if anything that we talked about here, you want more detailed information about, you'd like a demonstration or presentation on this content, please let the Tableau team know. We're going to provide you guys with Brian and my contact information, but we're also happy to put you into contact with your direct account team as well. Holly says, I've noticed that sometimes the object placement isn't the same once I publish it on Tableau Public. Does that also happen with Tableau Online? So the orientation of different pieces is kind of determined by the scaling of the layout here. Tableau Public has some default scaling that it does that doesn't happen on Tableau Server. So there is a little bit of that, it doesn't always line up with what you've set as your custom sizes. on Tableau Public. So just like you design content specific to a particular device, like a phone layout or a web layout or whatnot, there are certain things, like specifically with Tableau Online, keeping it like the lower scale limits are usually fine, but some of the bigger scale limits and the wider scale limits can be a little bit tricky. There's some community posts that talk about that stuff that are worth taking a look at. Yeah, not a problem. Any other questions? Remember, if you want to ask a question directly, feel free to take yourself off mute, and we're happy to discuss that. This is a pretty straightforward sort of demonstration of fundamental capabilities. If there is a question about something that you didn't see on this that you'd like to have a little bit of a peek into, I'd be happy to. We've got some extra time, so I'd be happy to dig into some of those things. If not, I might pick a couple of things at random and show you guys that stuff as well. So a couple of, is there a question?
Yeah, I thought the feature where it recognizes the location of all the airports based on their codes is really cool. Is there any other similar features like that? I don't know, you put in designation for a city or something and they'll allow cities or whatever, other stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
so that's a great question. So let's go back over here to our map. So Tableau automatically recognizes a lot of different geographic locations. So if we just look at this list here, area codes, cities, congressional districts, countries, regions, counties, states and provinces, zip codes, postal codes. Those are all things that Tableau recognizes automatically. There are some additional things that that Tableau can recognize. So let's use another thing, for example. If I have this thing called FAA region. If we look at this field, this is just Central, East, Great Lakes, etc. These are just arbitrary places, but I can actually create a map out of that. So I'll start with my state. So I'm just going to double click on state. I have all my state locations. Let's just make this a map. So I've got all my state locations. Now, if I go in here and I go to FAA region, I can assign this a geographic role, but there's no role in here for FAA region. So I can actually create this from state. I can say, look at the states that are aligned to these regions, and let's use those. So I select state. And now I have a new hierarchy that says that FAA region is a combination of states. If I put that on color, I have all of my FAA regions mapped out here. And if I take state off, and let's go ahead and put this on label, I have the individual regions, FAA regions mapped out here. So this is a way to augment your data, your mapping data. Another thing that you could do is you can bring in like spatial data. So if you have like, say, like block groups from census tracts or census data, or you have like business regions, like sales regions or something like that, we can bring that in as connecting to tools like Esri or Google KML or other sorts of data files, which is pretty cool as well. Howard asked the question, do you have examples of data cleaning or error checking? I typically spend most of my time trying to exclude errors in data and wanted to see if rules can be created to filter outlier data. So Howard, I highly recommend you take a look at our videos related to Tableau prep. Specifically, there's a whole host of things that Tableau prep can do along that line. I can give you guys a quick preview of what that looks like right here. And Cassidy brings up a good point. So while we go into the data field, for example, bird seen and bird struck. So in some of this data, bird seen and bird struck comes across, it looks like the 2nd of February. So one of the things that you can do in our data set here, so bird seen, go to describe, of a field that looks like 10th of February. So I can actually come in here and I can augment my data in Tableau Desktop directly by going to aliases, double clicking on that field and changing this to 2-10. And that's gonna change every incident where that February 10th date is now a 2-10 in my data set. That's one way to do it, but sometimes there's so many different changes that need to be made that you need to have a different method of managing that. So that's where Tableau prep comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to a data set here real quick, just to give you guys an illustration of what this can do. I'm going to connect to a text file that I have. So let me use this one here. So I have a lot of fields in this table. And one of my fields, this is all sort of like bridge demographic data, but I have this field here called structure. Now there's a lot of things in here that I might want to clean up and transform. And I'm just going to do, I'm going to do some cleaning updates to this. So I've got all of this extra punctuation. I've got different kinds of spelling of the same word, lots of things. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go down to clean and I'm going to remove punctuation. And that's going to get rid of all those dashes and asterisks. I can also come in here and remove extra spaces. I also recommend when we're working with data to make everything uppercase to get rid of any inconsistencies that way. And what this is doing is this is using algorithms and it's creating sort of simple one-click regex transformations that significantly simplify the data transformation process. There's a lot of fields in here. Yeah, no, Holly, this is definitely a really cool tool. And I have a whole hour-long workshop that goes into a deep dive about all of these features. We're just skimming the surface on what Tableau Prep can do. But yeah, if you're interested in more about Tableau Prep, please reach out to us, your account team, and we're happy to dig into this. This is part of your creator license. So when you get a creator license, you don't just get Tableau Desktop, you also get Tableau Prep. So this is a really powerful tool to augment what you're doing with Tableau Desktop. And just like simple things like that to improve the process of working with data. There are some basic things that we can do to transform our data in Tableau Desktop. There are some really cool, much more advanced, but just as easy to use things that we can do to transform our data in Tableau Prep. So that's what I would recommend pointing at, Howard. One of the other common Yes. One of my other common questions that I get from folks is, I want to do calculations. How robust are the calculations in Tableau? So Tableau's calculation engine is just as robust as the calculations that you might expect out of something like Excel. So let's do a very simple calculation. Actually, let's go over here. This is a common one. So I want to know, rather than the absolute value here of my number of incidents, I want to know the percent of total incidents for my indexes. So I can do something really simple here. I can use what we call a quick table calculation. So I would like to do a percent of total calculation for all of my values here. Let me go ahead and close because it's using up all of my system resources. One of the cool new features of the newest version of Tableau Server is that Tableau Prep and Tableau Desktop are now also completely accessible as web edit features. So if I go to my Tableau Server here, and let's just go out here to our data. I can do a new prep flow using this data source to do Tableau Prep in my web browser without even having to have a client-side install. So nothing installed on my computer. I can just connect to this data and start building a flow. So that's super cool. So coming back here to this, oh, that's why. Control Z. So let's do it on our label here. So my quick table calculation, percent of total, and there we go. So I have 35% rather than 3,500. So that's one way that we can use calculations to do really quick, useful business math. But I also might want to know, say, the ratio of average cost of repairs to number of incidents. So I can create a calculated field and say I want to know the average cost of repairs inflation adjusted divided by the count distinct of index number. So cost ratio. So writing calculations in Tableau is also incredibly easy. So now that I've got that, I can look at this and I can see my cost ratio or my percent of total. If I make a mistake and need to change a calculation, I can come in here. Maybe I need to swap my numerator, my divisor, and do like that, and apply. And the other thing is, it's like a very intuitive text engine. So as I start to type things, it's going to try to autofill. I can even drag and drop different elements. So if I want to, compare something different, like my count of flight numbers to my cost of repairs, I can just drag and drop different pieces in and do it that way. So very, very intuitive, very easy. And then when I'm looking over here at my calculations, if there's something over here that I want to focus on, so like say an aggregation, I can see when I if I use that function, what is that function going to do? There's a nice description over here. The last thing is here for some of the data scientists out there, I will show you. Let's go over here to table calculations. So model and script. So model and script are indications of Tableau's ability to work with different types of either data science modeling statistical models, or reference things like Python or R to bring in scripts or language from a different tool set to be used in Tableau directly. So I can reference an R server, do a regression analysis, put that regression analysis script in Tableau and reference that as part of a broader or larger calculation that's evaluating that based on one of the data dimensions that I might be exploring. So some really cool things that I can use to augment my data even more with some powerful tools, data science tools like those. Okay, so some cool things that we've highlighted over the last 2 hours. We've got a few minutes left. I'm happy to take some more questions, or we can go ahead and wrap this up and give you guys a few more minutes back in your day. Do I have suggestions for shared dashboards that are maintained by more than one person? In Excel, I would normally indicate changes via comments or notes, but haven't figured out how to do that in Tableau yet. So the typical recommendation that I would have for collaborating on development in Tableau is to use Tableau Server. And I'll give you an example of that. So let me go back up here to my my dashboard that we've been looking at. So I want transportation and air transportation. So I've got my workbook here, and I might be working with my partner or my colleague on this. So I can use comments here to talk about what I've done. And the other thing that I can do here is, like, let's say I make changes to this data set or this visualization. If I come in here and make a change to this, so I don't know, we put in a change. If I look at this, I can see my revision history, and I can see all of the different instances where this has been saved or saved over, and see what those changes are. However, there is not a track changes thing in Tableau per se. So I'm not going to see, for example, like I do in Excel or Word, if I, make a change and it highlights the thing that I changed. It doesn't show that, but I can use comments to say, hey, I made this section darker, and I can put that in, and let's even focus on this and post that, and they can come in here and see, okay, what did I make darker? So I can use comments and revision history to do sort of track changes, but there's not a similar sort of highlighted change tracking that Tableau does, at least not yet. Any other questions? If not, then I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to Brian to wrap us up and say thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you all very much. We will be following up with a link to the recording and contact information for Kevin and I. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to follow up with us. Send us an email, give me a call, and we just want to end by thanking you for your time. To committing a couple hours of your time to learning Tableau is a sacrifice, and we truly appreciate it. We look forward to your continued journey in the Tableau world, and hope to help as much as we can. Take care.
Aloha. Mahalo.